morning, Scallywag Spoo here with another mindless drivel, and today we are talking about the Justice League. Sort of. Actually, we are talking about the movie Brightburn. Specifically, the end of Brightburn. Now, if you haven't seen the movie Brightburn, it basically asks a very simple question. What if Superman was evil? And what you end up getting as a result of that is your basic slasher movie where the killer just happens to have superpowers. Personally, I really enjoyed the film. It didn't do all that well at the box office, and the critics have kind of universally panned it, but I personally really enjoyed it. If I had to come up with some kind of a beef for the movie, it's basically that the first half hour or so felt a little rushed. However, I can also defend that beef by simply saying we all know the history of Superman. We've seen a dozen Superman movies in the past. We don't need to see that origin story told all over again just because it happens to be an evil character this time as opposed to going on to put on the blue tights. Having said that, it would have been nice if we would have seen a little more development of his powers kind of through the years, as opposed to going from his arrival on Earth to being 12 years old and suddenly he's got powers. Which is pretty much all we get in this movie, with the exception of one throwaway line that Brandon Byers had never been sick, never bled, never been cut, never been bruised, anything of the sort. So his parents knew all along that he was basically Superman, but it didn't really sink in until he starts throwing lawnmowers and mutilating chickens. But this is not a review. We're actually going to be talking about something a little more specific here, and that being the very, very end of the movie. So of course, if you have not seen Brightburn and are planning to, and you don't want to have the movie spoiled for you in any way, look away now, because I'm about to do exactly that. Now, all of the trailers and marketing that I saw for this movie led me to believe that it was actually made by James Gunn. And while he did produce it, he did not direct it. Having said that, he did have a very heavy hand in the making of the movie. And of course, one James Gunn staple does show up at the very tail end of the movie during the credits. As the credits begin, we see a couple of scenes of Brandon, or Brightburn as he's now being called by the media, terrorizing his local town. Of course, the actual movie ends with him crashing a plane to cover up all the evidence of the murders that happened at his home, but then we see him taking down a building, we see a field on fire with his little logo that he's made for himself. But the scene in question here is when we actually cut to an Alex Jones-style news show hosted by none other than Michael Rooker. This is where things get interesting. In this scene, he shares a few conspiracy theories about Brightburn himself, but then he mentions something very interesting. Something that actually didn't catch my attention right away. He mentions that in a previous episode he had talked about a half-man, half-fish that had been sinking fishing boats. Now when he first mentioned that, something clicked in my head and I kind of giggled to myself. I actually kind of wondered to myself, is this supposed to be a nice little Easter egg nod to Aquaman? And my wonders were very quickly confirmed, because he then goes on to talk about a witch that has been choking men out using cords and ropes. So now this little clicking in my head went from Easter egg to, wait a minute, he's talking about Wonder Woman now. Now I'm gonna apologize right up front because I've only been able to find a couple of clips of this scene online. One was incredibly tiny and the other one was just really poorly shot. So it's very dark and very hard to make out. But this is what we see next. As you can see, Michael Rooker, or Big T as he's known in the movie, goes on to show 6 pictures side by side. One of those pictures is Brightburn, of course. The second picture is the Aquaman character he mentioned. The third is the Witch or Wonder Woman. And there are 3 more pictures across the bottom. One is simply a question mark. Don't know where that one's gonna go to. My first thought was, who's left? Batman? But he doesn't have superpowers, so it can't be that. The one in the center, I really don't know what to make of it. It basically looks like your classic bulbous head alien wearing a Doctor Strange cape of some sort, so I don't know if that's supposed to be a nod to Martian Manhunter or something. And honestly, in all of the articles and videos that I've watched about the ending credit scene of Brightburn, no one ever mentions that picture, so I honestly have no idea what that one is supposed to be. But it's the sixth picture that actually gets my attention the most. Now, I will admit, when I sat in the theater and watched this scene, I didn't quite get a good look at that sixth picture. Because it was about that time that everything was starting to click in my head, oh my god, this is an Easter egg to the Justice League. But I did notice that the bottom left corner picture was a man in red. So of course I thought, well, maybe that's supposed to be the Flash. I would later go on to find out that I was actually wrong here. And it actually is something a little more interesting. Because it turns out that the picture that is on the bottom left-hand corner, the man in red, is something from a previous James Gunn movie. That picture is none other than Rainn Wilson as Frank Darbo, otherwise known as the Crimson Bolt. And of course that is from the movie Super from 2010. Very good movie, very funny, very grim at the same time, but excellent movie made by James Gunn back in 2010, so definitely if you haven't seen that movie, go and check it out.
Shut up, crime.
So if we are talking about superpowered individuals here, why do we see a picture of the Crimson Bolt in the corner? Well, this is actually where the plot thickens even more. Even if you haven't seen the movie, surely you've seen the trailers for the film, and more specifically the scene that takes place in the diner. Now in the movie itself, the diner scene takes up a good chunk of time, and in fact several scenes take place in that diner. What you may not have noticed, however, is the actual name of the diner. Turns out that the diner is actually called Darbo's, as in Frank Darbo, the Crimson Bolt. Now I do want to interject here, it's actually D''Arbos, so I might be saying it wrong. It's been a long time since I've seen Super, to be honest with you. I have seen it several times, I love the movie, but I might be mispronouncing the last name, so just throwing that out there so you don't have to put it in, I know. In fact, somebody actually noticed this and asked James Gunn himself, is this just a throwaway Easter egg, or is this some kind of tie-in? And surprisingly, I just spit everywhere. And surprisingly, James Gunn actually did admit that he wanted to look back at Frank's story and give him some kind of closure that was better than what the movie gave him. And that, in fact, Frank did get his life together, move to Kansas, and open a diner. So, confirmation from James Gunn himself, yes, the Crimson Bolt does exist in the Brightburn universe, and in fact, he owns the diner that Brightburn attacked. So we now have a horror cinematic universe with superheroes. So what does it all mean? I have no idea. What I hope that it means is that we will get a Brightburn sequel that will bring in other superpowered beings, and that not all of them will be bad. Just imagine, I mean, it's one thing to make a horror film with a superpowered villain. It's an even bigger thing to make a sequel to that same horror film with multiple superpowered villains. But as we learned in Brightburn, regular people stand no chance of fighting a superpowered individual. So does that mean that the sequel will also bring in superpowered good guys? Or even regular people who don't have superpowers but who do consider themselves to be superheroes? I, for one, would like to think so. All in all, guys, it was an excellent movie. A little rushed at the beginning, but I understand why. And yes, there were some things that were kind of never tied up. And in case you haven't seen it and you don't mind spoilers, or if you have seen it and have no idea what I'm talking about, gotta jump onto IMDb real quick because I forgot the girl's name. I'm talking about Caitlin. Caitlin is the girl that Brandon Beyer has the crush on, but when he shows up in her room one night to try to show her that he has feelings for her, it only creeps her out, leading to the incident at school the next day where they're all standing in the circle and doing a trust circle, and she calls him a pervert and lets him fall to the ground. The teacher, of course, then tells her to help him up, which she begrudgingly does, and Brandon crushes her hand. The big diner scene I previously mentioned was actually Caitlin's mother, because Caitlin explains to Brandon that her mother doesn't want her to associate with him any longer. So Brandon kills her as a way of getting her out of the way so that he can be with Caitlin. But then after that scene, we never see or hear from Caitlin ever again. Now, they did actually say that there was an alternate ending to the movie that they had in mind at one point, and thank God they didn't use this, where Caitlin would actually show back up at the very end of the movie to fight Brandon, now sporting a metal hand. What? Thankfully it was changed to where we just don't see her again, and while yes, that does create a nice little loose end, it is something they can circle back to if the sequel is ever made. And they have said that they are pushing for a sequel to get made now, hopefully to be released within the next year or two. But, like I mentioned before, the film didn't do great at the box office, and most critics have kind of been not so kind to this movie. So whether or not a sequel ever happens, we'll just have to wait and see. So what are your thoughts, guys? Would you like to see an evil Justice League horror film, Brightburn 2? Let me know. Put it in the comments below. Continue to comment, like, share, and subscribe, as always, as we do videos here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And yes, I'm aware that the last week or two, I've been off schedule a lot. I apologize for that. The short version, basically, I've started a second job here recently, so my work schedule has been kind of crazy. So either I haven't had the time to shoot, or by the time I got home, I was just so tired that shooting was the last thing on my mind. Having said that, I do hope to get back on schedule and back on a regular basis, hopefully beginning with this video. So be sure to subscribe. Also, Scallywags, make sure you jump over to www.geekycool.com. This, of course, is our new sponsor, and we have partnered up with them, basically sharing the love for all things nerd. You can hop over there to find articles, movie reviews, just, videos and thoughts and all sorts of great things. And I will also be doing some exclusive video work for that channel as well. So you definitely want to go check out geekycool.com so you don't miss out on any of those great things. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, we'll see you soon.